Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parbrahm Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Dhyanamoolam Guru Murti Pujamulam Guru Padam Mantramulam Guru Vaki Mokshamulam Guru Kripa. Shivoham friends. So yesterday we read out chapter 79 and 80, also of course 77 and 78, but 79 and 70 were fully loaded with spiritual knowledge, because in the questions that Karkati asked to king and his ministers, lot of description and uh, properties, we can say, of the supreme being was described in questions itself, and then the answer of the ministers also carried the full description of supreme being. Although I mean it's not correct to say the full description, but whatever he said was in the description of supreme being. And in today's chapters 81, the king will answer to Karkati's questions. The Rakshasi said, "Well said, O counselor. Your explanations are sanctifying and filled with spiritual doctrines. Now let the king, with lotus eyes, answer the other questions." The king answered, "He whose belief consists in the renunciation of all reliance on this world, and whose attainment depends upon forsaking all the desires of the heart, whose expansion and contraction causes the creation and extinction of the world, and who is the object of the doctrines of Vedanta, and who is inexpressible by words or speech of humankind, who is between the two extremes of doubt, and who is between the both extremes, and whose pleasure displays the world with all its animate and inanimate beings, whose universal permeation doesn't destroy his unity, and whom, being the soul of all, is still but one. He alone, O lady, is truly said to be the eternal Brahma. This minute particle is falsely conceived as a spirit, because it is invisible to the naked eye, but in truth it is neither air nor any other thing except pure consciousness. This smallest of particles is said to be sound or words, but it is error to say, because it is far beyond the reach of sound or the sense of words. That particle is all, yet nothing. It is neither I, you, or he. It is the Almighty Soul, and its power is the cause of all. It is the soul that is attainable with great pains, and which, being gained, adds nothing to our possession, but its attainment is attended with the gain of the Supreme Soul. There is no better gain. Ignorance of soul stretches the bounds of our worldliness, and repeated reincarnation with their evils, growing like the rankest weeds in spring, until they are rooted out by spiritual knowledge. Ignorance of the soul stretches the bounds of our worldliness, and repeated reincarnations with their evils growing like the rankest weeds in spring until they are rooted out by spiritual knowledge. I have repeated this 10th word. Those who are in easy circumstances in life lose their souls by viewing themselves only as solid bodies that rise quickly to view like a dense mirage by light of the sun. This particle of self consciousness contains Mount Meru and the three worlds in itself, like bits of straw. They are distinguished from it in order to present their delusive appearances to us. Whatever is imprinted in consciousness appears expressed without it. The fond embrace of passionate lovers in dream and imagination serves to exemplify this truth. As consciousness rose to itself with its omnipotent will at the first creation of the world, so it exercises the same volition in its subsequent formations also. Like springs growing from the joints of reeds and grass, the hobby that enters the heart also shows itself on the outside, as in the example of children's whims. The minute intellect, small as an atom and as subtle as the air, fills the whole universe on all sides. As a cunning and conceited man deludes young girls by gestures, calls, winks, and glances, so the holy look of divine consciousness serves as a prelude to the endless rotating dance of worlds with all their hills and contents. It is that atom of consciousness that develops, that envelops all things within its consciousness and represents also their forms outside it. Just like a picture on canvas shows the figures of the hills and trees drawn in it standing out as in bas relief. The divine spirit is as minute as the 100th part of the point of a hair, yet it is larger than the hills it hides in itself, and as vast as infinity, being unlimited by any measure of space or time. The comparison of the vast emptiness of divine understanding with a particle of air is not an exact simile. It is like comparing a mountain with a mustard seed, which is absurd. The minuteness attributed to the divine spirit is as false as attributing different colors to a peacock's feather and of jewelry to gold, which cannot be applicable to the spirit. It is that bright lamp that has brought forth light from its thought without any loss of its own essential brightness. If the sun and other luminous bodies in the world were dull and dark in the beginning, then what was the future of the primeval light and where was it? The pure essence of the mind, situated in the soul, saw the light displayed on the outside by its internal particle of the intellect. There is no difference between the lights of the sun, moon, and fire, and the darkness out of which these lights were produced. The only difference is that of the two colors, black and white. As the difference between clouds and snows consists in the blackness of one and whiteness of the other, such is the difference between the light and darkness, only in their colors, not in their substance. Both of these being inanimate in their nature, there is no difference between them. They both disappear or join with one another before the light of consciousness. They disappear before the intellectual light of the yogi, whom, under the blaze of his consciousness, perceives no physical light or darkness in his abstract meditation. They join together as light and shade, the shadow inseparably following the light. The sun of consciousness shines by day and night without setting or sleeping. It shines in the bosom of even hard stones without being clouded or having its rise or fall. The light of this blazing soul has lighted the sun, which diffuses its lights all over the three worlds. It has filled the capacious womb of earth with a variety of provisions. Just they store large baskets of food in a warehouse. It enlightens darkness without destroying itself, and the darkness that receives the light becomes as enlightened as light itself. As the shining sun brings the lotus buds to light, so the light of the Divine Spirit enlightens our intellects amidst the gloom of ignorance that envelops them. As the sun displays himself by making day and night by his rise and fall, so does the intellect show itself by its development and restraint by turns. All our notions and ideas are contained in the particle of the intellect. Just like a healthy seed contains its in its breast and leaves, flowers and fruits of the future tree. These and all the powers of the mind develop themselves in their proper times. Like flowers and fruits, make their appearance in spring and proper seasons. The particle of Divine Spirit is altogether tasteless, being so very flavorless and devoid of qualities, yet it is always delicious as the giver of flavor to all things. All tastes abide in the water, like a mirror in the recipient of a shadow, but savor, like the shadow, is not the substance. It is the essence of the spirit that gives it the flavor. All bodies that exist in the world and our unconsciousness of Him are forsaken by the atomic spirit of the Supreme, but they remain dependent upon Him by the consciousness of the divine particle shining in their souls. In answers to who are forsaken by and supported by the divine spirit, it is He who, being unable to wrap Himself, wraps the world in Him by spreading out the clothing of His atomic consciousness over all existence. The Supreme Spirit is of the form of infinite space. It cannot hide itself in anything within its sphere, which would be like hiding an elephant in grass. Yet, this all knowing Spirit encompasses the world, knowing it to be a trifle, just like a child holding a grain of rice in his hand. This is an act of illusion. The Spirit of God exists even after the dissolution of the world by relying in His consciousness. Just like plants survive the spring by the sap they have derived from it, it is the essence of consciousness that gives rise to the world, just as the garden continues to flourish by the nourishment of the spring season. No, the world is truly a transformation of consciousness, and all its productions are like plants in the great garden of the world, nourished by the spring juice of consciousness. It is the sap supplied by the intellectual particle that makes all things grow up with myriads of arms and eyes. In the same manner, the atom of a seed produces plants with 1,000 branches and fruit. Myriads of kalpas amount to an infinitesimally part of a twinkling of the atomic consciousness. As a momentary dream presents a man with all the periods of his life from youth to age. In answer to what twinkling of the eye appears as many thousand kalpas, even this infinitesimal of a twinkling is too long for thousands of kalpas. The whole duration of existence is as short as a wink of his eye. Only an idea makes a twinkling appear a kalpa and many kalpas, just as the idea of satiety in starvation is a mere delusion to the deluded soul. Only lust makes the famished feed upon his thousands of food. Despair of one's life presents his death before him in his dream. All words reside in the intellectual soul within the atom of its consciousness. Outer worlds are only reflections of the inner prototype. Whatever objects appear to be situated anywhere, it is only a representation of its model in some place or the other, and resembles the appearance of figures in bas relief on any part of a pillar. But the changes occurring in external phenomena are no results of the internal, which being the serene vacuum is subject to no change. All existences present in consciousness at this moment are the same as they have existed and will ever exist inwardly, like trees in their seeds. The atoms of consciousness contains the moments and ages of time. Like grain within the husk, it contains these in the seed within the infinite soul of God. The soul remains quite aloof, as if retired from the world, in spite of the existence and dependence of the world upon the soul. The divine soul at all times remains unconcerned with its creation and its preservation. The essence of the world springs from the atom of pure consciousness. However, consciousness itself remains apart from both the states of action and passion. There is nothing created or dissolved in the world by anybody at any time. All apparent changes are caused by the delusion of our vision. This world, with all its contents, is as empty as the vault of empty atmosphere. We apply the word to phenomena, but it is an insignificant term signifying nothing. It is the particle of consciousness that is led by the delusion of Maya to view scenes situated in the divine soul in the outward appearance of the world of phenomena. The word external and internal, as applied to the world, are meaningless and not positive terms. There is no inside or outside of the divine soul. These are contrived for the instruction of pupils to explain its different views by the consciousness. The viewer, looking into the invisible being within himself, comes to see the soul. He who looks on the outside with his open eyes comes to view the unreal as real. Therefore, whoever looks into the soul can never see false phenomena as realities, as others do. It is the internal sight of consciousness that looks into the inner soul, which is without all desires. The external eyes are mere organs to look upon the false appearance of outer objects. Here I remind one slok, I have read it somewhere, in which Bhagavan Hanumanji is saying that Deha Buddha tu daso aham, Jiva Buddha tvadanshakah, Atma Buddha tomeva aham iti me nishchitah mati. So if I consider myself as a body, then I'm your slave. And if I consider myself as a soul, then I'm your part. I'm apart from that infinite being. And if I consider myself as Atman, spirit, then I am you. This is clear in my mind. This is the essence of that shlok that I've told you. So the same thing is repeated here, that one who sees the souls, he cannot find this outer world as to be the reality. So there can be no object of sight unless there is a looker. Just like there can be no child without its parent. This duality arises from the lack of knowing their unity. The viewer itself becomes the view, as there can be no view without its viewer. Nobody prepares any food unless there is somebody to feed upon it. It is in the power of consciousness to create the views of its vision, just like It lies in the capacity of gold to produce all the various forms of jewelry. The inanimate view never has or can have the ability of producing its viewer. Just like the golden bracelet has no power of bringing gold into being, consciousness, having the faculty of reasoning, forms thoughts of what can be perceived within itself, which, however unreal, are falsely viewed as real by the intellect by its intellectual vision to its own deception, just like the deception caused by the appearance of jewelry in gold. The viewer, being transformed to the view, is no more perceptible in it than the jewelry of gold and not gold itself. Thus, the viewer becoming the view still views himself as the viewer, as gold transformed into jewelry is always looked upon as gold. There being only one unity apparent in all nature, it is useless to talk of the duality of the viewer and view. A word with a masculine suffix cannot give the sense of a neuter noun. The viewer, who feasts his eyes seeing the outer visible world, cannot have sight of the inner soul with the internal eyes of his consciousness. But when the viewer shuts out the outer view, all its realities appear as unreal. When the viewer perceives the unreality of what can be seen by the light of his understanding, then he comes to see the true reality. So by withdrawing the mind from seeing the bracelet form, one comes to see only its nature of gold. If what can be seen is present, there must also be their viewers to whose view they are apparent. It is the absence of both viewer and the seen, and the knowledge of their unreality, that produce the belief of unity. The man who considers all things in the humility of his conscious soul comes at last to perceive something in him that is serenely clear and which no words can express. The minute particle of consciousness shows us the sight of the soul as clearly as a lamp enlightens everything in the dark. The intelligent soul is without perception of the measurer, and measured. Like liquid gold dissolved from its forms of an ornament, there is nothing that is not composed of the elements of earth, water, and the like. Therefore, there is nothing in nature that is apart from the nature of the atomic consciousness. The thinking soul penetrates into all things in the form of their notions, because all thoughts concentrate in the intellect. There is nothing apart from it. Our desires, being the parents of our wished for objects, our desires are the same as our desired. Therefore, there is no difference between our desires and the objects of our desire. Just like there is none between the sea and its waves. The Supreme Soul exists alone, unbounded by time or space. Being the Supreme Soul, it is the soul of all. Being omniscient, it is no dull matter at all. The self-existent, being only consciousness, is not perceptible to sight. There is unity and no duality in it, but all forms unite into one in the great self of the Supreme. If there is a duality, it is the one and its unity. The unity and duality of the universal soul are both as true as the light and its shade joined together. Where there is no duality or any number above it, unity can have no application to anything. And where there is no unity, there can't be any two or more over it, because they are only repetitions of the unity. Anything is in itself such as it is. It can't be more or less than itself. but is identical with itself, like water and its fluidity. The multiplicity of forms which it exhibits blends into a harmonic whole without conflict with one another. The varieties within creation are contained in Brahma, like a tree with all its several parts in the embryonic seed. Its dualism is as inseparable from it as the bracelet from its gold. Although the many forms in nature are evident to comprehensive understanding, yet it is not true to the true entity. Like fluidity of water, the movement of air, and the emptiness of the sky, this variety of forms is an inseparable property of God. A systematic inquiry into unity and duality is the cause of misery to the restless spirit. It is the lack of any such distinction that is the highest knowledge. The measurement, and measurer of all things, and the view and vision of the visible worlds are all dependent on the atom of consciousness that contains them all. The atom of divine consciousness spreads out and contracts in itself by an inflation of its spirit, as it were by a breath of air. These mountainous orbs of the world are like its limbs. Oh, the wonder and great wonder of wonders that this atom of consciousness should contain in its embryo all the three regions of the world above and below one another. It is an incredible delusion that must always remain an inexplicable riddle how the enormous universe is contained in the minute atom of consciousness. As a pot contains the seed with a huge tree within its cell, so the divine soul contains the atom of consciousness containing the chains of worlds outstretched within itself. The all-seeing eye simultaneously sees all the worlds situated within the bosom of the intellect, as microscopic sight discovers the part of the future tree concealed in the seed. The expansion of the world in the atom of consciousness is analogous to the enlargement of the hidden parts of the seed into leaves, branches, flowers, and fruits. As the many forms of the future tree is contained in the uniform substance within the seed, it is in like manner that the multiplicity of worlds is situated in the unity of the atomic consciousness. Such can be is seen by anyone who will but look into it. It is neither a unity nor a duality, neither seed nor its sprout. It is not thin or thick, born or unborn. He is neither an entity nor a non-entity, nor graceful nor ungraceful. Though it contains the three worlds with the ether and air, yet it is nothing and has no substance at all. There is no world and no known world other than consciousness, which is all of itself and is said to be such and such in any place or time. As it appears so and so to us there and then. It rises as if unrisen and expands in its own knowledge. It is self same with the Supreme Soul, and as the totality of all cells, it spreads through the entire emptiness like air. Like a tree springs from the ground according to its seeds, so the world appears to sight in the form as contained in the seed of consciousness. The plant doesn't quickly quit its seed, lest it would dry up and die for want of its sap. So the man who sticks to the soul and seed of his being is free from disease and death. Oh, this is a great statement. The people are very much worried about their disease, and he is saying that the man who sticks to the soul and seed of his being is free from disease and death. Mount Meru is like the filament of a flower compared to the vastness of that atom. Everything that can be sensed has its place in that invisible atom. Meru is truly a filament of the atomic flower of the divine soul, and myriads of Merus resemble the cloudy spots rising in the sphere of consciousness. It is that one great atom that fills the world after having made it out of itself and given it a visible, extended, and material form in its own holosphere. As long as the knowledge of duality is not driven out of the mind, it finds the charming form of the world as in its dream upon waking. But the knowledge of unity liberates the soul from its stay in and return to the world, which it beholds as a mouse of the divine essence. With this chapter 81 comes to an end. Should I take the chapter 82? Let me take at least chapter 82 also with it. And in this chapter 82, Rakshasi becomes friend with the king and criminals as food. Vasishtha continued. The silly Karkati of the forest, having heard the king's speech, pondered well the sense of the words and forsook her levity and malice. She found the coolness and tranquillity of heart after its fervor was over, just like a peacock when the rain sets in, or a lotus bed at the rising of moonbeams. The king's words delighted her, like the cries of cranes flying in the sky gladden the passing clouds in the air. The Rakshasi said, "Oh, how brightly shines the pure light of your understanding! It glows as a serenely by its inner brilliance as it is illuminated by the sun of intelligence. Hearing the elements of your reasoning, my heart is as gladdened as when the earth is cooled by the serene beams of humid moonlight. Reasonable men like you are honored and venerated in the world, and I am as delighted in your company as a lake of lotuses with full blown buds under moonbeams. The company of virtuous scatters its blessing just like a flower garden spreads its fragrance all around, and like the brightness of sunbeams brings the lotus buds to bloom. The company of the good and great dispels all our sorrows, just like a lamp in the hand disperses surrounding darkness. I have been fortunate to have found you as two great lights in this forest. Both of you are entitled to my reverence. Please let me know what good intent has brought you here." The king answered, "O offspring of the savage race of Rakshasas, the people of this province are always afflicted in their hearts by a certain evil. It is the stubborn disease of choleric pain that troubles the people of this part. Therefore, I have come out with my guards to find her out in my nightly rounds. No medicine removes this choleric pain from the hearts of men, so I have come in search of the mantra revealed to her for its cure. It is my business and professed duty to persecute such wicked beings as yourself who infest our ignorant subjects in this way. This is all I have to tell you and do in this place. Therefore, good lady, promise in your own words that in future you will never injure any living being." The Rakshasi replied, "Well, I tell you truly, my lord, that I shall henceforward never kill anybody." The king replied, "If that be so, you who lives on animal flesh, tell me how can you support your body if you abstain from animal food?" Rakshasi replied, "It has been 6 months, O king, since I have risen from my samadhi meditation and fostered my desire for food, which I wholly renounce today. I will return to the mountain top, resume my steadfast meditation, and sit there contented as long as I lie in the posture of an unmoving statue. I will restrain myself by unshaken meditation until my death, and then I shall quit this body in its time with gladness. This is my resolution. I tell you now, O king, that until the end of this life and body of mine, I shall no more take the life of any living being, and you may rely assured upon my word. There is Mount Himalaya by name, standing in the heart of the northern region, and is stretching in one sweep from the vast east to west. At first, I lived there in a cave by its golden peak. I was in the shape of an iron statue, and also like a cloud fragment, and I bore the name of Karkati the Rakshasi. Thereby, the austerity of my meditation, I obtained the sight of Brahma, and I expressed my desire to kill mankind in the shape of a destructive needle. I obtained the boon accordingly and passed a great many years in the act of afflicting living beings and feeding on their entrails in the form of choleric pain. Then Brahma prohibited me from killing the learned, and he instructed me in the great mantra. He gave me the power of piercing the hearts of men with some other disease that infest all mankind. I spread myself far and wide in my malice and sucked the heart blood of men, which dried up their veins and arteries and emaciated their bodies. Those I left alive, after devouring their flesh and blood, begat a race as lean and without veins as they had become themselves. You will be successful, O happy king, in getting the mantra for driving away choleric pain, because there is nothing impossible that the wise and strong cannot attain. Receive immediately, O king, the mantra that Brahma uttered to remove choleric pain from the cells of arteries weakened by cholera. Come and let us go to the nearby river. After you are both prepared by washing and purification, then I will initiate you with the mantra. Vasishtha said. Then the Rakshasi proceeded to the riverside that very night, accompanied by the king and his minister, all joined together as friends. These two men, being sure of the Rakshasi's friendship, by both affirmative and negative proofs, made their ablutions and stood on the river bank. Then the Rakshasi tenderly told them the mantra that Brahma had revealed to her to remove choleric pain, and which was always successful. Afterwards, the nocturnal fiend was about to depart and leave her friendly companions behind. The king stopped her with his speech. The king said, O you of gigantic stature, by teaching us the mantra, you have become our teacher. We affectionately invite you to take your meal with us tonight. It doesn't become you to break off our friendship, which has grown at our very first meeting like the acquaintance of good people. Give your ill-favored form a little more graceful figure and walk with us to our home and stay there at your own pleasure. The Rakshasi replied, You can well provide a female of your own kind with her proper food. But what entertainment can you give me to my satisfaction? I am a cannibal by nature. It is only a Rakshasa's food that can satisfy me, not the little morsels of petty mortals. This is the innate nature of our being, that it cannot be done away with as long as we carry our present bodies. The king answered, Ornamented with necklaces of gold, you shall be at liberty to remain with the ladies in my house for as many days as you may like. Then, for your food, I will produce the robbers and felons that I seize in my territories. You will have them supplied to you constantly by the hundreds and thousands. Then you can then forsake your attractive form, resume your hideous Rakshasi figure, and kill hundreds of those lawless men for your food. Take them to the top of snowy mountain and devour them at your pleasure. Great men always like to take their meals in privacy. After your recreation with that food and a short nap, you can resume your meditation. When you are tired with your meditation, you can come back to this place. You can take other offenders for your slaughter. Killing culprits is not only justifiable by law, It amounts to an act of mercy to rid them of their punishment in the next world. You must return to me when you are tired of your meditation, because friendship, even that found with the wicked, is not easily done away. The Rakshasi replied, "You have spoken well, king, and I will do as you say. For who is there that will slight the words of the wise, spoken to him in the way of friendship?" Vashiti said. Saying so, the Rakshasi assumed a graceful form and wore necklaces and bracelets and silken robes and laces. She said, "Well, king, let us go together." Then followed the footsteps of the king and his counselor, who walked before her and led the way. Having arrived at the royal residence, they passed that night with their agreeable meal and discoursed together. As it became morning, the Rakshasi went inside the house and remained there with the woman. Meanwhile, the king and the minister attended to their business. Over the course of 6 days, the king collected together all the offenders he had seized in his territory and from other parts. These amounted to 3,000 heads, which he gave to her. She resumed her fierce dark form of the black fiend of the night. She laid hold of thousands of men in her extended grasp, like a cloud fragments holds drops of rainwater in its white bosom. She took leave of the king and went with her prey to the mountain top, just like a poor man takes gold that he happened to find in some hidden place. For 3 days and nights she refreshed herself with her food and rested. Then regained the firmness of her understanding. She employed herself in meditation. After 4 or 5 or sometimes 7 years passed, she used to get up from her tap and return to where men live and to the court of the king. There they passed some time in confidential conversation. Then she returned with her prey of the offenders to her mountain seat. Thus freed from cares, even in her lifetime, she continued to remain as a liberated being in that mountain. With this, the chapter 82 also comes to an end, and our today's reading session will rest here. And by the grace of Sadguru Maharaj and Lord Ram, we will rest our session here itself, and we'll meet again tomorrow for chapter 83 onwards. Shivoham, friends. Shivo.